The Crow is an unwatchable piece of shit, and like so many remakes that come out nowadays, it does not resemble the original movie at all. It's The Crow in name only, as everything has been changed for the worst. Eric Draven is now a weak, pathetic loser who cries repeatedly throughout the movie, gets beaten up by everyone, and only becomes the Crow in the last 20 minutes. The first 40 minutes are dedicated to his girlfriend Shelley, who is the main character during this, and his Crow companion, which originally served as Eric's lifeline to the real world, no longer does this, and is now just his guide, except the Crow doesn't guide Eric anywhere, as he has to do all the investigation himself, which makes the Crow in The Crow completely pointless. Do not watch this movie. It's a slow, boring, miserable mess full of terrible characters and horrific dialogue. The pacing is just awful, as the movie somehow feels both incredibly long and also very rushed. And the reason why is because it drags out really boring shit that doesn't matter, while speedrunning through important plot points and character building moments. The remake is also less about revenge and more of a cringe, melodramatic love story, where Eric cries every 5 minutes because he misses his girlfriend, and is just a whiny little bitch, which gets very repetitive very quickly. The story is an absolute mess, it's full of plot holes and people making dumb decisions that make no sense, and there is absolutely nothing to enjoy about this movie. Even the action scenes, the few there are slow, poorly executed, and completely lifeless. They're almost as bad as the acting, which is cat shit, since nearly everyone in this can't act, especially the main female lead. I don't know who this remake is for, because it seems to be aimed at people who enjoy Twilight, which would be mentally ill women, but since it's rated 18 and there's some violence in it, they probably won't enjoy it. It's bastardized the original beyond all recognition, so the OG fans will hate it, and it's such a boring slog to get through that the average moviegoer won't enjoy it. So who the fuck is this film for?
Oh, I don't fucking know.
The soundtrack is atrocious, and the romance between Eric and Shelley, which takes up the first third of the movie, is painful to get through, mostly filler, and could have very easily been condensed down to 5 minutes. Because at the end of the day, seeing their entire romance develop is completely unnecessary to the plot, as the character Shelley serves nothing more than to be motivation for the Crow's revenge. We don't need to learn that she liked to play the piano as a kid, because quite frankly, who gives a fuck? Speaking of the Crow, they've changed his powers so that the Crow has nothing to do with Eric's immortality. No, instead he gets his super healing from love. So why the fuck is he called the Crow if his powers have absolutely nothing to do with crows?
Who fucking cares?
The main villain is a man called Vincent Rogue, who's an immortal asshole that made a deal with the devil to sacrifice innocent people in order to extend his lifespan. And that's it, that's all we really need to know about the character. He's incredibly one-dimensional and generic. Lastly, we have Mexican Odin, and I call him such because he's surrounded by crows, acts as some sort of divine authority, and most importantly, I can't be bothered to look up the actor's nationality, so he's Mexican. We learn absolutely nothing about his character, not who he is, what he does, or what exactly this train station where he lives at is. All we learn is that he wants Eric to stop Vincent because reasons, that's it. Every one of these characters suck ass and are complete charisma vacuums with no personality. Now, for those of you still interested in just how much of a dumpster fire this remake is, well, here's the plot. It begins with Shelley being sent a blackmail video of Vincent from her friend, who's very quickly killed. Shelley is then immediately followed by one of his henchmen who is waiting outside her apartment. So in order to get away from him, Shelley makes the retarded decision to bump into some police officers where she drops a bag of drugs and gets arrested. I don't know why she chose to get arrested instead of, just asking the police for help, saying that a strange man is following her. But then the rest of the plot wouldn't happen if she had more than one brain cell in her skull. So Shelley gets sent to a mixed-gender rehab prison for drug offenders, which is a terrible idea since men and women are separated for a reason.
It's gonna happen. You're gonna get raped.
Well, I guess this must be a very modern prison where gender doesn't mean anything. So Shelley ends up approaching Eric, a pathetic loser who is being bullied both by the inmates and the guards as well, because everyone hates him. Well, everyone except for Shelley, who finds his weak and cowardly nature very attractive, so the two of them hit it off almost immediately. But when Vincent finds out which prison Shelley is staying in and sends a bunch of people to kill her, Shelley has to escape, and luckily for her, Eric knows exactly how to do it by climbing out an open vent in the laundry room. Wait, if Eric knew how to escape the whole time, then why did he choose to stay in a prison where he was being constantly bullied? I don't fucking know, and neither do the writers. So they hitch a ride back to town from a helpful stranger, walk through the busy streets and enter the 5-star hotel where Shelley is staying at. And they do all of this while still wearing their prison clothes, which no one seems to find suspicious.
That's fucking stupid.
Now Vincent needs Shelley's phone, which has the Blackmail video on it, which she has placed in a safe in this apartment. And we know Vincent knows about this place, since he had one of his goons waiting outside for Shelley at the beginning of the film. So why has Vincent not sent anyone to search this apartment for both her and the phone? Well, the real reason is because the writing is terrible, and Eric needs to come back here later on to find the phone, which wouldn't be possible if Vincent was a remotely competent villain. But before all that, we have a lot of boring filler where Shelley and Eric go on a bunch of cringe dates that nobody wants to see, until eventually Vincent finds out where they both are and sends his men to kill them. Eric is then transported to platform 9 3/4 where he meets Mexican Odin, who snaps him back to reality. Eric wakes up, kills a cop that works for Vincent before throwing himself off a nearby bridge where he once again meets Mexican Odin. He tells Eric that Shelley is going to hell, but he can save her by killing Vincent and his crew because he made a deal with the devil and Mexican Odin has a problem with it. Why? Don't know. Eric is sent back again where he finds Shelley's phone and learns about the Blackmail video she was sent, but instead of it showing Vincent to have demonic powers or him committing some sort of crime, what it actually shows is Shelley stabbing a woman to death. So how exactly does this Blackmail video incriminate Vincent? Because from what I see, it incriminates Shelley more than anyone. I don't know, and neither do the writers. The only purpose of this video is to make Eric doubt Shelley so that his healing stops working, because his powers run on love, which is why the video stops being relevant to the plot and is never mentioned again. So because his powers aren't working, he gets ambushed and dies for the 3rd time, where he meets Mexican Odin again. Mexican Odin no longer wants to send Eric back to reality and doesn't seem to care about stopping Vincent anymore, because he's angry at Eric for doubting his girlfriend, who used to be a whore by the way.
Oh my god, I'm dating a whore.
He eventually relents when Eric says that he is willing to trade places with Shelley, so Mexican Odin gives him some black blood, which completely changes Eric's personality, as now he is totally fine with killing multiple people, when 5 minutes earlier he was on the verge of tears after finding out his girlfriend stabbed someone.
What are you, gay?
Anyway, Eric goes on to paint his face with black blood and does his best tough guy impression in front of the mirror.
Well, who the hell else are you talking to? Talking to me?
Eric heads off to confront Vincent and all his goons at the local opera house, and after a very boring and disappointing fight, he finds out that Vincent isn't even here. So afterwards, Eric begins to cry because that's all he has done all movie, before once again heading back to the same bridge he threw himself off earlier, only this time he doesn't kill himself but leaves flowers for Shelley.
Oh my god, who the hell cares?
Eventually, Eric confronts Vincent at his mansion before dragging him to platform 9 3/4. Vincent ends up being sent to hell and Shelley comes back to life. But Shelley comes back to life just after the pair of them were strangled to death by Vincent's men, which would mean that she has been sent back to the past. And we know it's the past because Eric and Shelley are wearing the same clothes they died in days earlier. Time travel is now in The Crow. Is this an alternate timeline or a different universe? I don't fucking know, and neither do the writers who wrote this shit. So the movie ends with Eric becoming the ultimate simp, who is totally fine with staying in hell, purgatory, or wherever the fuck he is forever, because Shelley, the whore, gets to live.
This is awful.
Now this reminds me of the Harley Quinn show, where Victor Fries sacrifices his life to save his wife, and before his body had even thawed, Nora had managed to turn herself into a miserable, drunk, cock-hungry whore, thus making his sacrifice completely meaningless, which I guarantee Shelley will be following suit. The Crow remake is so bad that it's got me thinking about modern remakes in general, and why most of them suck ass, and I think George R.R. Martin summed it up best.
And, you know, there's a few phrases in Hollywood that
You want the screenwriter to feel he's free to make it his own. And too many screenwriters do make it their own, even if they're adapting Dickens or Tolkien or Shakespeare or whoever you want, they decide to make it their own. But they never make it better, because usually the people who are making it their own are simply not as good as the people who wrote it in the first place.
That is what these people have done to these franchises. They carve their signatures into other people's work because they lack the talent to create anything of their own. Anyway, that was the 2024 remake of The Crow.
It's a piece of shit.